Hello everyone. So welcome to the last session in our theme 2, session number 17, that is British and socio-cultural policy. It's gonna be relatively small session. Last session was 1 hour long session. This session will be small. So first we'll discuss the session, then we'll revise what we have done very quickly in theme 1 and theme 2, right? And then we'll move on to theme 3. So let us solve some questions first. First question is 2011 question, UPSC. With reference to the period of the colonial rule in India, the home charges form an important part of the drain of wealth. Home charges form an important part of the drain of wealth from India. Which of the following funds constitute the home charges? From the name itself, home charges. Last time we have discussed in detail about what are these home charges are. Fund used to support Indian office in London. Funds used to pay salary and the pension of the British personnel. Funds used for waging war outside India by the Britishers. Okay, by the British. You can pause the video and try to answer the question. It's a good question. Now we have discussed the home charges are basically what are the charges, part of the drain of wealth, the invisible part. Within the invisible part, home charges are the charges which are there, money used coming from the India and used for the maintenance of the things which are there in England, right? So the option is funds used to support Indian office in England, such as Secretary of State and these people. And second, used to pay salary and pension of the British personnel. For example, Lord Dalhousie retired, then he has to pay the pension. Now he will be paid pension not of the British exchequer, but from the Indian exchequer. So that is a kind of a drain of wealth. Okay, so answer is 1 and 2. Waging the war outside India will become the part of the direct plunder. Okay, that will not be considered as the part of the your home charges. Next question. Actually, we will discuss Indian education in detail. I think in the next session or next to next session. I think in the beginning of the modern nationalism, we'll discuss in detail about the development of the education. But before that, let us do this question. We have discussed it. Which led to the introduction of the English education in India? Charter Act of 1813, General Committee on Public Instruction, and Orientalist and anglicist controversy. So which of the following things which led to the English education in India? Very easy. All the three led to the English education in India. We have discussed this. We have discussed, I think I mentioned this General Committee on the Public Instructions, which was being set up. And then Charter Act, we have discussed that 1 lakh rupee was given. And from there, the idea of the education started. More about Indian education, about the education in the times of the British, we'll discuss in detail in a completely different section. Chalo, let us discuss 1 to 2 more questions. Which of the following statement is /r correct? Indian Penal Code was prepared by William Bentinck. Second, system of the both civil and civil services and the police were introduced by the Cornwallis. Indian Penal Code we have not discussed. We have discussed that one law member was being set up or was being there in the times of the British, and it came with the Charter Act of 1833. Okay. Before that, we have already discussed about Lord Cornwallis, that he was the person under which the police system was reorganized, and the thanas, the darogas, and your judiciary system civil services was brought into existence. Judiciary was started by the Warren Hastings. Some of the reforms were done by the Cornwallis, then by Lord Hastings, then by William Bentinck, obviously. So the British administration was India based upon the 3 pillars, the civil services, army, and the police. And we'll keep in mind these 3 pillars. When these 3 pillars will be broken up, that is civil services, police, and army, when these 3 pillars will break, then the British collapse will be imminent. And we will see, this is how we will trace at the end. For example, at the time of the Quit India movement, we'll trace this, that how these 3 pillars are collapsing. And when this pillar starts to collapse, when these institutions start to collapse, that will be the end of the British Empire in India, or the Britishers will get to know this is it. No more British Empire can continue. So the Cornwallis relieved Zamindar of their police functions and established the regular police force to maintain law and order. He modernized the Indian system of thanas. In this respect, India was put ahead of the Britain, whereby the police system has not yet developed yet. Okay, so we have discussed the circle system and the thana system. Next, the question is on the Indian Penal Code, IPC. So Indian Penal Code was finalized by Lord Macaulay. So in 1833, we have discussed that a law commission was appointed. Law commission was appointed to codify the Indian laws, which resulted in the compilation of Indian Penal Code. So it was the Lord Macaulay who has led, who has been said to be the instrumental for Indian Penal Code. Okay? And that is why many sections of the Indian Penal Code still said that these are from a colonial legacy, because we are still following this Indian Penal Code, isn't it? Right. Let us do one more question. Right. Easy question. You can solve it. Pause and solve the question. With reference to the Regulating Act of 1773, consider the following statement. British cabinet was given the right of controlling the Indian affairs. In Bengal, a collegiate system was created. Cornwallis became the first Governor General under this particular act. Pause and try to answer this question. We have discussed all the parts of it. Now, obviously, the third statement, if you see, Lord Cornwallis became the first Governor General. Obviously, that's not true. First Governor General was Warren Hastings. So third statement becomes wrong. 1 and 2. Now 1 is obviously right. So you don't have to check 1. 1 is obviously right, right? Second, a collegiate government is formed. This is what I want to discuss. Actually, we have beforehand the PPTs, we have already discussed it. Yes, a collegiate government. Collegiate government means government consisting of the Governor General and a council. So 1 plus 4 council was created by the Regulating Act, right? So it was a collegiate government, replacing the dual government. So dual government was being replaced by a collegiate government consisting of the Governor General and the 4 members of the council. Chalo. So the answer will be 1 and 2, and third statement will be wrong. We have done almost, I think, 5 to 6 questions on the Regulating Act itself. And we will try to solve as many questions as possible on these Charter Acts and Regulating Acts, so that these things remain in our mind. For example, before your exam, you also revise these PDFs, right? Or your notes. So these questions, objectively, you can revise from these questions and you can recall all the content which you have already studied. Because ultimately in the paper format, when paper time, exam time, you have to solve these questions only, nothing else. Chalo. Let us discuss the topic of the today, that is socio-cultural policies. Before discussing the socio-cultural policies, you need to see that what was the social condition of India. What is the condition of India at that point of time? So condition of India can be seen, 3 dominant factors can be seen. First, the religion, which is still a very important social condition. Second is caste. And one of the indicators is the condition of the women. Leave aside the condition of the LGBT community. We're not discussing even that. The condition of women was basically, there's a quote of Gandhiji that if you want to check the progress of a society, see the condition of the women, on the freedom of the women, the freedom the women have, isn't it? Okay. So the condition of the India was not really good, isn't it? We have discussed in the times of the William Bentinck that he has to undertake a lot of reforms. For example, we have discussed about sati and female infanticide. Similarly, we have discussed in the times of the Mr. Allen Boa as well, that he has to undertake a lot of reforms with respect to the infanticides. Now let us see one by one. The first is the arena of religion. So if you talk about the arena of religion, what will be the problems with the arena of religion? In the arena of religion, why is it so? First of all, now Indian society has not experienced the kind of the renaissance or the reforms which have been witnessed in the European societies, or especially the UK and the Europe. The Renaissance and the Reformation that you must have studied in your world history, that we have studied in our very first session, the Portuguese session, that kind of Renaissance and the Reformation, was not witnessed into the Indian society at that point of time. So all the previous medieval identities, all the religious obscurantism, superstitions, these were still rooted in Indian society. So you can see religious superstition, social obscurantism, magic and superstition. For example, let's say that some social customs related to the marriage, some that, for example, psychological, if you are having any psychological problem or mental health issue, it is related to ghost, for example, or religion. Still in India we face these problems, but obviously in a diluted sense. Religious was the dominant ideology. It was seen in almost our each and every act of the day, each and every social thing that we do, each and everything that we do on a personal level. Religion was a very dominant ideology. For example, animal sacrifice, some sort of physical torture was also there. For example, you can see in some of the festivals in different communities, some physical torture is there, right? The priest have an overwhelming and unhealthy influence over the people. We will see then reforms in the Sikhism, or the we will see Gurdwara reforms in the going forward themes. So the priest in having a very overwhelming influence, because they themselves held that we have the monopoly over the spiritual knowledge. Only we know the knowledge, and you have to come to us. And whenever you hold such an authoritative power, the power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So that power corrupted, and these priests have become such corrupt people. This was the reality of that time. Even in the present time you can see that. And that is why we have discussed the idea of the Jyotiba Phule, Gulamgiri. In fact, in current affairs I have discussed that. So he has written a book, Gulamgiri. We'll discuss about him as well. So in the Gulamgiri, he has written that about these Brahmin monopoly on the priesthood. And that is why later on a lot of reformers will come, that priesthood should not be confined to the Brahmins. There should be some merit based idea. Who can have, how can you say that a particular caste is having a monopoly over the priesthood, that these will become the priest? So these kind of reforms, and in the southern, in the Tamil Nadu and Kerala, especially in Tamil Nadu, such reforms have come later on. Justice Party and a lot of parties have been formed on that idea. If we talk about the condition of the women, we have seen the situation in the sati, we have seen the situation of infanticide, we have seen the situation of the female foeticide was not there, obviously, because they did not have the idea of this sex selection technology, right? So infanticide used to happen. Benign neglect obviously was there. Benign neglect means that even if the girl is born and she is allowed to live, but she will be neglected throughout her life till the time she is married. Then also it was the idea that child marriage is a very problematic area, that they used to get married earlier. Then the problems, the economic survey highlighted the son meta son preference. That girl is born, you cannot kill her, let's say out of the social pressure, or you are living in a good society, you cannot kill her. But you want a certain number of boys. For example, some couple require 1 boy, 2 boy, 3 boy. So in desire of these boy number 1 or boy number 2, you can have any number of girl, and this girl does not matter. Only matters are desired number of the boys, how many number of boys you require. Then there was a problem of the polygamy, one person marrying with so many girls. It was a case of a priest who married 200. He had 200 wives, one priest, and he was 80-year-old priest. And the lowest was the youngest was the 8-year-old bride. So because of this colonism, a lot of upper caste people have these a lot of wives. Similarly, there was a case of, for example, these begaris we have discussed, right? Begars. So their wife situation was very poor. Even if when the begar cannot, that person cannot pay the money, their wife were sent to the upper caste people for compensation. So these the practices, and this is being reflected in a lot of movies as well. This is the challenge, this is the class challenge, this is the class struggle that B.R. Ambedkar or the Marxists talk about. These are the factors which has given rise to the problem of the Naxalism, let's say. If you watch Hindi movies, you can watch one movie that is Manjhi. It's a motivational movie, it's a mountain man movie, but in that movie some small portion is being depicted like that. Okay, and then sati problem. So this was the condition of the women. Caste dynamics were also there. For example, you have the untouchables who were lowest in the hierarchy. A lot of disability and restrictions were placed on them. For example, if some high caste person is moving from there, if they are sitting on a chair, let's say, or a charpai, then they have to stand up. So such kind of disabilities, they have to show respect, and they cannot have, for example, they have to be always bare chested, let's say, because they cannot wear, they cannot have surnames, they cannot have surnames. So these are the problems. Surname, they don't have these kind of problems they face. So it became the obstacle in the growth of a national unity, because when the national unity comes, when all the sections of society work together against a common enemy. But one section of society is despising the other section of society, that will create a problem of the national feeling, that will create an issue in the nationhood. Then social mobility of these people are restricted. Even if some person is very talented, he belongs to untouchable caste or SC caste. So social mobility, that later on he can also become the priest, or he can teach in the, he can reach the higher education institution, is very, the probability is very low. So these were the situation, social conditions in India. Individual initiatives were curbed. And this is why, for example, current governments or previous governments have made a lot of efforts, for example, affirmative actions, for example, stand up India, startup India. So these are the uh, initiatives to undo this past historical social injustices. Coming to the discussion on the society of Europe and India, as we have discussed earlier, that European society has till now witnessed what? Renaissance, Reformation. The philosophy of the humanism has taken root, that is based upon the idea of a dignity of an individual, where the reason now needs to be reign supreme. Everything will be questioned. The things which will not pass the criteria of the reason will not be accepted. They will be challenged. So intellectual currents have become, science and development of science and technology has improved. We have discussed that. On the other hand, Indian society at that time remained very stagnant, decaying, and a very static society, very static society. And that happened from the times of the later Mughals itself. In the times of the Akbar itself, the initiative for science and tech were there, but very rare. And after Akbar, very less initiatives have been taken in that regard. So these are the challenges being faced in the economy, in the society. So when these Europeans will come to India, imagine. Now Europeans, now in India, a lot of people have come from outside. A lot of people have come from outside before. So those who have come before and those from the European, there was a fundamental difference between them. Europe, or I should say Britishers. Those who come before are belong to poor culture, and that means their cultural growth was even poorer than India. For example, India has a, for example, at that time, India had a better intellectual growth or a cultural growth or civilizational growth as compared to the people coming from outside. As compared to those, now Europeans have a better cultural and the civilizational growth than the Indians, or you can say the European society had a more reasonable values than India, or the values which were based upon the idea of human dignity, humanism, and all these things, science and technology. So this is how the Europeans or the Britishers in particular were more advanced than when they came to India. Hence, that is why the idea has come that it is the white man's burden to really, or to civilize these people rather than conquering them. Conquer to karna hi karna hai, but we have to civilize them. That is the moral high ground that they have set. Now, how to achieve that? Now, earlier there was an approach, that is the Orientalist approach. We have discussed that in detail. Now, the Orientalist approach tried to, because simultaneously you see what? One more thing is happening. Simultaneously one more thing is happening. Yes. Simultaneously one more thing is happening, that is, what is happening? Simultaneously, the British are also want to consolidate their power in India, economy, interest, trade. So they thought that earlier we will adopt this Orientalist approach. What does this approach mean? That we will try to find out the link between India and the British by going back in the ancient past. India going past and British going past. And we'll try to find one common heritage. That हम क्या हैं? हम भाई भाई हैं. India, British भाई भाई. So this is the common heritage they wanted to find. ठीक? So they wanted to compare the Indian image, previous image of India and the European history. So tried and studied the portray early image of India, established the connection between Sanskrit, Greek, and Latin. So this was the deliberate efforts to do so. so that we can find common roots, and ultimately we can say, yes, we have progressed, you were not able to, but we belong, we are brothers, and I will help you to progress, that kind of a thing. So they wanted to compare the privileged Indian past with the classical Western past. So they believe that conquered people are to be ruled by their own customs and laws. Till the time we do our trade, we get prosper by a trade. But if when it comes to rule these people should be ruled in their own laws, in their own customs, so that these people do not become a, let's say, there should not be protest from these people. There should be an acceptance by the people. Acceptance can be increased. So that is the idea. Okay? They want to legitimate themselves that we are the legitimate rulers and we are there legitimately because we have the roots, we have the resources, or we have the capacity to civilize you. So this is the idea. And it will attract and conciliate the distant affection. So whatever we are doing with you, with respect to land revenue, let us say, for example, exploitation, let us say, we are doing so to civilize you. So that is the idea behind the Orientalist approach. And for that, they have established a lot of institutions as well. We've discussed that. So today's session is basically everything we have discussed. So Cultura, Calcutta Madrasa by William Hastings, Asian Society of Bengal, William Hastings, William Jones, and Sanskrit College, Banaras, right? Dukanan. Now started happening in England some ideological changes. We have discussed that. For example, evangelists who started saying that by Christian missionary are the top and we need to spread the idea of Christianity. The other religion are very barbarian and they live like animal, and we need to go out there and spread the message of Christianity to them. Liberals were also there that we need to civilize, we should not intrude and all these things, free traders and all these things. We have discussed that how it has broken the monopoly in the trade. One more thing, we have understood that after the monopoly has been broken, there was an importance that we need to increase the market for the goods. To increase the market, we need to colonize the mind, right? And colonizing the mind, the best way to colonize someone's mind is by education. And this is how you will get the taste of the Britishers into India. So this was the idea behind the policies going on. And these people are called as the anglicist. So anglicist versus the Orientalist controversy we have discussed in detail. So these people will be the anglicist. Those who will say that they should be taught in the English language, English culture, English drama, English language, English literature must be taught to these people so as to civilize them, so as to train them in the modern language. That's it. Very quickly, let us discuss the 3 steps of the socio-cultural policies. So socio-cultural policies can be seen first, the policy of neutrality. The second phase can be seen when they will actively try to intervene. And the third phase will be seen of when they will show a reactionary policies or indifference or the policy of divide and rule. So these are the 3 policies, 3 stages can be seen in the socio-cultural policies of the Britishers. First phase, if we see till 1813, that phase is a policy of neutrality, that we will not interfere in the socio-religious matter. Otherwise, we might face some reactions from the people. So no interference in the tradition, usage and the custom, focus on trade, revenue and war with the native state, and busy in the consolidation. So this is your phase 1 with the people. In the phase 2, it was an anglicist approach, influence of the new philosophy with rationalism, free trade, evangelism, utilitarianism, liberalism, required transformation and the modernization of the society so as to increase the market penetration. We have discussed that. So English machinery and modern education needs to be taught. In that regard, for example, 1 lakh rupees, then your Macaulay's minute, then your Woods package, and all these things have come. In the second phase, you can see all these things are being done. For example, Richard Wellesley, prohibition of infanticide, prohibition of sati benting, Ellenborough, abolition of slavery, Widow Remarriage Act, prohibition of infanticide, Hardinge 1. This was not Ellenborough, it was Hardinge 1. I've said somewhere wrongly. Okay? So these are the steps being taken in your phase 2. And then the phase 3. Now, we'll see in the very next theme that phase 3 came up after 1857 revolt, when they start actively intervening in the socio-cultural space, then obviously a reaction was bound to come. And the reaction came in the form of the 1857 revolt. Obviously, there were other reasons as well, but one of the reasons was the interference into the socio-cultural practices of the people. And when there is a lot of interference in the socio-cultural practice of the people have also reacted in the form of the 1857 revolt. So in after that, they decided that no more socio-cultural intervention. We won't intervene again. We will repeat these ideas again. So they became indifferent, hostile, divide and rule, and void in the social reforms can be seen. Now we will not do any social reforms. Rather, they will put one against the another. For example, let's say Muslims versus the Hindus. Within the Hindus, conservative Hindus versus the liberal Hindus. Then one caste against the other caste. So this is the thing that they will do for the divide and rule policy. And they will institutionalize this divide and rule policy going forward, that we will see. So these are the three phases of the socio-cultural policies of the Britishers. That's the end of the session. Very small session, I told you. Let us see a few questions. The first question is, the staple commodities of export of the East India Company from Bengal in the middle of the 18th century were. So from Bengal, the commodities which were exported from Bengal in 18th century means 1701 to 1799. Now see the options: raw cotton, oilseed, opium, sugar, salt, zinc, lead, copper, zinc, gold, spice tree, cotton, silk, saltpeter, opium. It's a good question. Now we have not discussed it first of all, but let us apply some mind. कुछ दिमाग apply करते हैं. Now let us see. Do you think that India will have a lot of gold and silver which will be exported from Bengal to the British? Answer is no. So when obviously you cannot have gold or silver being exported from India, so eliminate this option. Okay. Then you eliminate the idea that why will the Britishers will export sugar, let's say. Why will they export this sugar from? So we have eliminated the third option. Why will they eliminate the sugar or salt per se? Right? So sugar is also gone. Okay? Then they talk about 1701 to 99. Right? And this is where you need to understand that this cotton growing or silk growing which is there. Right? Silk, we have discussed the sericulture by the Tipu Sultan, right? For silk, mainly two places are very famous: China and India. China is the number one producer, and then the India is there. So in that regard, I know that this is a tricky question. Choose out of these two, but the options you see: oil seed, opium, raw cotton, and cotton, silk, saltpeter, and opium. Opium common, eliminate opium. Cotton and silk. Silk is the deal breaker here. Silk is the deal breaker here. Okay. So I know that this is a relatively tough questions, but this is where you need to have these observations. You need to interconnect with a lot of ideas. Okay. For example, it becomes easy for us also as a faculty for us. Basically, this was being written in some textbooks, obviously. But for us also, it becomes a tricky task to cover such areas. But with our parallel information, for example, you must have prepared or you will prepare location factors in your GS1 geography. Within the location factor, you will talk about the silk, and there you will read about this silk. Okay? So when the silk, and silk is such a precious commodity, and that is why it's being transferred from silk to here. For example, when you read in your economy that gold, we import such a lot of gold, and that is why our current account deficit is so high, isn't it? From Switzerland, especially, we import Switzerland and the Gulf countries. So these are the reasons. These are the reasons you need to interconnect a lot, and that is why these questions are being UPSC questions are being separate from the test series questions, because they will challenge some extra thing. If you get these questions right, these questions comes in the category of strive. That if you strive in these questions, then you get into it. Okay, so let's finish with this idea, and that's the end of your theme 2. Now, very quickly, in the theme 1, we have discussed the idea of the British conquest. British conquest. So we have seen that how British have overpowered the Portuguese, the Dutch, the other Europeans, how British have overpowered the Mysore, Maratha, Bengal, and the outside areas like Nepal, Bhutan, Burma, Sindh, Punjab, and Afghanistan. So these areas, how Britishers have taken these areas up. Then in the second theme, we talked about some of the tools which were adopted to do so. For example, subsidiary alliance, doctrine of lapse. And more importantly, we have discussed all the governor generals from the time of the Robert Clive, who was a governor, to Warren Hastings, to Lord Dalhousie. Each and every one we have discussed, some in detail, some in the references. A lot of battles we have discussed, a lot of treaties that we have discussed. For that, I told you need to make a chart. है ना, थोड़ा सा chart ऐसे you can make timelines like this. For example, 1757 Palasi, then 1759 Bedara, then 1760 your Battle of Wandiwash, then Battle 7064 your Buxar, then Treaty of Allahabad, like that. So you need to make a timeline with respect to it, vertical or horizontal, whatever you want to make. Or you can make timelines with respect to century wise, for example 18th century, 19th century, like that. Okay. Then in the theme 2, last 2-3 sessions, we talked about the impact of the British administration. We discussed about the idea of the land revenue policies. We discussed about the idea of the economic impacts. And lastly, in the last session, we discussed how the Britishers have done the socio-cultural policies. And in the theme 3, when we'll enter in the theme 3, we will talk about that now British have conquested and done some policy things. Now, what is the Indian reaction to it? Indian reaction will come in the forms of the, very quickly I'll just explain, in the form of a lot of revolts. Some revolts will be civilian revolts, some revolts will be tribal revolts. And one of the biggest revolt that will undertake, that is 1857 revolt. So these are the topics that we will discuss in our theme 3. So till then, bye-bye. Keep revising, solve a lot of questions. We have discussed almost, I think, 70 odd or 88, around 80 questions we have discussed. And as I told you, around 300 questions, minimum to minimum 300 questions we will discuss. Keep on revising these questions, revise this content only, that will be more than enough. Bye-bye, thank you. Please do read NCERT, start reading the NCERT, the new NCERTs. These are very good, written from a different perspective. So it will provide you a new perspective rather than reading the same things in a very detailed frame, not required at all. Rather read the new NCERTs, which will be more helpful to provide you new perspectives. So till then, bye-bye, thank you.